She was 2 months pregnant when she found the note and $50,000 on the kitchen counter. Just like that, the man who'd promised her forever had vanished. He said she'd interfere with his ambitions, that fatherhood wasn't part of his plan. 8 years later, he showed up begging for a second chance. But Rachel had already won. Let me take you back to that April evening when her world collapsed. Rachel came home from her architecture job, tired but content, planning to talk nursery colors with her fiancé, Trevor. Instead, she walked into their Tribeca loft and noticed something wrong immediately. His side of the closet stood empty. Hangers swayed on the rod, lonely and bare. On the kitchen counter, a handwritten note waited next to a bank envelope. I can't do this. I've thought about it from every angle, and I'm not ready to be a father. Maybe I'll never be ready. You deserve someone who can give you the family you want, and that's not me. I've transferred $50,000 to your account to help with expenses. Please don't contact me. I'm sorry. T. Rachel read those words 5 times. Her hands started shaking. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the kitchen floor, still holding that note. She sobbed until her throat burned raw. $50,000. That's what Trevor Ashford, her fiancé of 2 years, the tech entrepreneur she'd supported through every late night and investor pitch, decided would settle his conscience. He'd reduced their 3-year relationship and their unborn child to a transaction. But here's what Trevor didn't know when he walked out that door. He wasn't taking Rachel's future with him. He was just clearing space for something better. This story isn't about what he took from her. It's about what she built without him. It's about the empire she created as a single mother, the billionaire who saw her worth when Trevor couldn't. And the moment her ex came crawling back, desperate and broken, only to discover he'd lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Make sure you're subscribed to the Penthouse Diaries and that notification bell is on, because this journey from heartbreak to triumph is one you won't want to miss. Drop a comment if you believe karma is real. Trust me, you'll see it in action. Now let me tell you how Rachel and Trevor's love story began. Rachel Morrison first saw Trevor Ashford across a crowded ballroom in Manhattan during the fall of 2012. She'd gone to the charity gala reluctantly, dragged along by a colleague from her architecture firm who'd insisted networking would be good for her career. Rachel had been nursing a glass of champagne, half listening to a conversation about zoning regulations, when she heard a voice that made her turn around. Trevor stood near the center of the room, surrounded by a small crowd, explaining his vision for FlashPay, a mobile payment platform that would revolutionize how small businesses process transactions. His passion was magnetic. He didn't just talk about profit margins and market share. He talked about empowering mom-and-pop shops, about giving immigrant entrepreneurs the same tools that big corporations had, about changing the world one transaction at a time. Rachel believed every word. They met properly at the dessert table an hour later. Trevor grabbed the last chocolate tart at the exact same moment she did. Their hands touched. He smiled, gestured for her to take it, and said something cheesy about sweetness being meant for beautiful women. She laughed despite herself. They spent the rest of the evening talking, long after most guests had left. What started that night grew into something Rachel had never experienced before. Trevor wasn't just ambitious. He was driven in a way that inspired everyone around him. FlashPay had secured its second round of funding just weeks before they met, and the company was growing fast. 15 employees became 30, then 60. Trevor worked late nights and early mornings, but he always made time for Rachel. He'd show up at her apartment at midnight with takeout, wanting to hear about her day, her projects, the sustainable housing development she was designing. Their lives intertwined quickly. Within 6 months, they'd moved into a Tribeca loft together, exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that sparkled at night. Rachel would sketch architectural plans at the kitchen table, while Trevor took investor calls in the next room. They'd celebrate his wins and brainstorm solutions to his challenges. When her firm's senior partner finally approved her proposal for a green retrofit project, Trevor took her to dinner at the city's finest restaurant and toasted to her brilliance. By their second anniversary, FlashPay had grown to over 200 employees. The company's valuation climbed past $20 million. Magazine profiles started appearing. Trevor's face showed up on podcast covers and conference stages. Rachel attended every event, standing beside him in elegant dresses, smiling for photographers, genuinely proud of what he'd accomplished. She never felt like an accessory. Trevor introduced her as his partner, told journalists that her support made everything possible, credited her insight during moments when he doubted himself. When reporters asked about his success, he'd squeeze her hand and say, "None of this means anything without someone to share it with." The proposal came on a quiet Sunday morning in their loft. No grand gestures or public displays. Just Trevor, holding his grandmother's vintage sapphire ring, telling Rachel she was the only future he wanted. The ring fit perfectly. She said yes before he'd even finished asking. They spent the next months planning everything. The wedding venue, the honeymoon destination, the timeline for buying a house outside the city. Trevor wanted children eventually, maybe 2 or 3, after FlashPay's next major funding round. Rachel agreed. They had time. They had their whole lives ahead of them. Their engagement felt like walking through a dream where nothing could go wrong. Rachel's architecture career flourished. She earned a promotion, started leading her own team, won recognition for her sustainable design approach. Trevor's company kept climbing. Series C funding was on the horizon, $50 million that would cement FlashPay's position in the market. They were building an empire together, or so Rachel thought. Then March 2015 changed everything. Rachel had been feeling off for weeks, nauseous in the mornings, exhausted by midday, emotional in ways that didn't match her usual temperament. She dismissed it as stress from work deadlines until her period was 2 weeks late. She bought 3 pregnancy tests on her lunch break, hands shaking as she placed them on the pharmacy counter. Back at the loft, she locked herself in the bathroom. 3 tests, 3 pink lines, all positive. Rachel stared at those lines for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. This wasn't the plan. They'd agreed to wait, to let Trevor secure his company's future first. But as the initial shock faded, something else took its place. Joy. Pure, unexpected joy flooded through her. A baby. Their baby. Yes, the timing was off, but they loved each other. They were engaged. They had stable careers and a beautiful home. Plenty of successful people manage both professional ambitions and families. They'd figure it out together. Rachel planned the perfect moment to tell him. She made a reservation at the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first date, the one with the corner booth and candlelight that made everything feel romantic. She wore his favorite dress. She rehearsed the words a dozen times. What she didn't anticipate was the look on Trevor's face when she finally said them. The moment Trevor's fork clattered against his plate, Rachel knew something was terribly wrong. They were sitting in the corner booth of Bella Notti, the cozy Italian restaurant where they'd shared their first meal together 3 years earlier. Candlelight flickered between them. Rachel had just told him about the pregnancy, expecting surprise, maybe some initial worry, but ultimately joy. Instead, his face drained of color. "You're sure?" His voice came out tight, strained. 3 tests, all positive. Trevor pushed back from the table. He loosened his tie, ran both hands through his hair, and stared at the wall behind her, instead of meeting her eyes. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "This changes everything," he finally muttered. Rachel's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "The timing, Rachel. The timing is terrible. We can't do this right now." "Can't do what? Have a baby? Trevor, we're engaged. We live together. We have stable careers." "You don't understand." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "The investors are watching every single move I make. We're this close to closing the Series C, $50 million. If they think I'm distracted, if they think I'm not fully committed to FlashPay, they'll walk. Everything I've built could collapse." Rachel felt like she'd been slapped. "You're talking about our baby like it's a business liability. That's not fair. I'm being realistic about what we're facing." "Realistic?" Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. "What's realistic is that we're going to be parents. That's reality, Trevor. Not some hypothetical scenario you can plan around." His jaw clenched. "You know how important this funding round is. Once it closes, once the company is secure, then we can think about starting a family. But right now, it's the worst possible timing. So what are you suggesting? The pause before he answered told her everything. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, just until things settle down. And we need to consider our options regarding the pregnancy. The word options hit her like ice water. Options? I'm just saying we need to think this through logically. Look at all the angles before making any permanent decisions. Rachel grabbed her purse and stood. Her hands were shaking. I'm leaving. Rachel, wait. Don't follow me. She walked out into the cool spring night, leaving him sitting alone in the restaurant where their relationship had begun, where apparently it was now ending. What followed were the worst 2 weeks of Rachel's life. Trevor grew more distant with each passing day. He started staying late at the office, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. When Rachel tried to discuss baby names or prenatal appointments, he'd claim he had urgent investor calls or meetings to prepare for. He took phone conversations into other rooms, closing doors behind him. His mother stopped returning Rachel's calls. Before the pregnancy announcement, Catherine Ashford had been calling weekly to discuss wedding plans and venues. Now silence. Complete radio silence. Friends from Trevor's social circle suddenly became unavailable. Coffee dates got canceled. Dinner invitations dried up. Rachel realized with growing horror that he'd been talking to people about her, framing the situation in ways that made her the problem. The arguments when they did talk grew increasingly bitter. Trevor accused her of not understanding the pressure he faced. Rachel pointed out that plenty of successful entrepreneurs had families. He countered that he wasn't plenty of people. He was building something unprecedented, something that required total focus. So I'm a distraction now? Rachel asked during one particularly heated exchange. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. On the evening of April 14th, Rachel came home from work exhausted and emotionally drained. The apartment felt different the moment she walked in. Too quiet, too empty. She found Trevor's closet first. Every suit, every shirt, every pair of shoes, gone. Bare hangers swayed gently on the rod. Her breath caught in her throat as reality sank in. On the kitchen counter, a handwritten note lay next to a bank envelope. Rachel, I can't do this. I've thought about it from every angle, and I'm not ready to be a father. Maybe I'll never be ready. You deserve someone who can give you the family you want, and that's not me. I've transferred $50,000 to your account to help with expenses. Please don't contact me. I'm sorry. Tiam. $50,000. That's what Trevor Ashford had decided their 3-year relationship was worth. That's what he thought would absolve him of responsibility for the child growing inside her. A financial transaction to ease his guilt and buy his freedom. Rachel read the note once, twice, 5 times. Each reading made the words feel more surreal and more devastating. Her knees gave out. She sank to the kitchen floor, still clutching that piece of paper, and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that tore through her chest and left her gasping for air. Her throat ached. Her eyes burned. But she couldn't stop. He'd reduced 3 years and an unborn child to a transaction. He'd chosen investor meetings over the family they'd planned together. He'd walked away from everything they'd built because the timing didn't suit his ambitions. The man she'd loved, the man she'd believed would stand beside her through anything, had abandoned her when she needed him most. Rachel's parents called 3 days after Trevor left. They'd heard about the breakup through the grapevine and wanted their daughter to come home to Ohio. They had space. They could help with the baby. Rachel wouldn't have to face New York's brutal expenses alone. I appreciate it, Mom, but I'm staying, Rachel said, staring out at the city skyline from her loft windows. I built a life here. I'm not letting him chase me away. Her mother sighed. Sweetheart, pride won't pay the bills. This isn't about pride. It's about proving to myself and to my child that we don't run when things get hard. She meant every word, even if it terrified her. The spare bedroom became a nursery through sheer determination and YouTube tutorials. Rachel painted the walls herself on weekends, chose a soft yellow-green that would work for any gender. She assembled the crib alone, cursing when the instructions made no sense, celebrating when the final piece clicked into place. Her colleague Diane came over with takeout and helped hang curtains. the only person from work who hadn't awkwardly distanced herself after the breakup. Prenatal classes were torture of a different kind. Rachel sat in a circle of glowing couples, all of them holding hands and sharing excited glances. An empty chair sat beside her every single week. The instructor would occasionally glance at that chair, then at Rachel, sympathy flickering across her face. Rachel learned to focus on the breathing exercises, the information about labor positions, anything except the fact that she was doing this alone. The rumors didn't help. They spread through Trevor's social circles first, then leaked into hers. Some people said she'd gotten pregnant on purpose to trap a rising tech entrepreneur. Others whispered that Trevor had found someone else, someone who understood his ambitions better. A few brave souls told the truth, that he'd simply abandoned his responsibilities. But those voices were drowned out by speculation and gossip. Rachel stopped trying to correct the narrative. Let them believe whatever made them comfortable. The stark truth was worse than any rumor. Trevor had looked at his pregnant fiancée and decided his company mattered more than his family. Most people couldn't accept that someone they admired could be that selfish. Sophie arrived on a gray November morning, 3 weeks early and completely ready to meet the world. Labor lasted 14 hours. Rachel's mother had flown in just in time, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement when Rachel thought she couldn't push anymore. Then the nurse placed a tiny squirming bundle with dark curls and delicate features into Rachel's arms. Everything changed in that moment. The fear, the anger, the betrayal. It all took a back seat to the fierce protectiveness that flooded through her. This child, this perfect little person, had done nothing to deserve the circumstances of her birth. Sophie deserved stability, love, and a mother who would fight for her. "Hello, sweet girl," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you. I promise." The first year passed in a haze of sleepless nights and relentless logistics. Newborns didn't care about work schedules or exhaustion. Sophie needed feeding every 3 hours, diaper changes at impossible times, soothing when nothing seemed wrong, but she cried anyway. Rachel learned to function on 4 hours of broken sleep, to shower in 5-minute bursts, to eat meals cold because warming them required time she didn't have. Daycare searches consumed her limited free time. She visited facility after facility, comparing costs against her shrinking savings, weighing safety against affordability. The $50,000 Trevor had left helped, but it wouldn't last forever. Not with New York rent, baby supplies, medical bills, and everything else piling up. Her architecture firm granted maternity leave, but returning part-time made her position precarious. Her supervisor delivered the news gently. Part-time employees weren't eligible for advancement. Rachel understood the subtext perfectly. Stay if you want, but you'll never make partner. You'll never lead major projects. Single mothers can't be counted on. That realization led to the boldest decision of her life. She used the last of Trevor's money, plus a small business loan that made her palms sweat when she signed the paperwork, to start Morrison Design. One woman, one laptop, one massive gamble. Her first office was the kitchen table. Her first employee was herself. Her first clients were skeptical friends who needed small renovations. The rejection hurt more than she'd expected. Potential clients would meet with her, glance at Sophie's photo on her desk, and suddenly remember they'd decided to go with a larger firm. Others questioned whether a one-woman operation could handle complex projects. Some asked outright if she had the bandwidth, given her situation. Rachel learned to turn every no into motivation. She bid on smaller jobs that bigger firms ignored: municipal building retrofits, residential sustainability consultations, garage conversions for young families. She delivered every project ahead of schedule and under budget, built a portfolio one success at a time, and let her work speak louder than their doubts. Progress came slowly, then faster. A client referred her to their neighbor. That neighbor's friend needed help with a green renovation. Word spread that Morrison Design delivered quality work without the premium pricing of established firms. By Sophie's third birthday, Rachel had hired 5 employees and moved into actual office space. Her specialization in sustainable residential projects set her apart from competitors. She won a regional design award for a brownstone retrofit that cut energy costs by 40%. Then a national award for innovative water conservation in urban housing. Architecture magazines started calling for interviews. Rachel kept every article in a folder, not because she needed validation, but because she wanted Sophie to see them someday. Proof that they'd made it through. Meanwhile, Trevor's Flash Pay closed its Series C funding, the $50 million he'd sacrificed everything for. Then came Series D. In 2019, the company went public with a valuation that briefly touched $300 million. Financial publications estimated Trevor's personal wealth at around $40 million after taxes and stock dilution. He'd achieved everything he'd abandoned Rachel for. The money, the recognition, the empire he'd claimed required his total focus. Rachel read about his success in industry newsletters and felt nothing. No bitterness, no jealousy, just a quiet certainty that her life had turned out better without him. She had Sophie. She had Morrison Design. She had proof that resilience and determination could build something real and lasting. Trevor had his millions, but Rachel had something infinitely more valuable. A daughter who knew she was wanted, and a career she'd created on her own terms. September 2021 brought Rachel to Denver for her first major speaking engagement. She'd been invited to join a panel on sustainable urban design, recognition that Morrison Design had become a respected name in the industry. For the first time since Sophie was born, Rachel would be away from her daughter for 4 full days. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" Rachel asked her mother for the 10th time as she packed. Her mom laughed. "Sweetheart, Sophie and I are going to have a wonderful time. Go show them what you're made of." The conference center buzzed with energy. Architects, developers, and urban planners from across the country filled the halls exchanging business cards and ideas. Rachel's panel went better than she'd hoped. She presented her Philadelphia brownstone retrofit case study, fielded questions about cost-benefit analysis of green materials, and connected with several potential clients during the break. That evening, she attended the keynote dinner in a ballroom that sparkled with chandeliers and conversation. Rachel found her assigned seat at a table with representatives from various development firms. She introduced herself to the woman on her left, then turned to greet the man on her right. He stood to shake her hand. Tall, with graying temples and laugh lines around his eyes, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from experience rather than ego. "Rachel Morrison," he said, reading her name card. "I caught your panel this afternoon. Your work on that Philadelphia brownstone retrofit was brilliant." "Thank you." Rachel felt herself relax slightly. "I wasn't sure anyone outside the niche community would find it interesting. I pay attention to good design." His smile reached his eyes. "Gregory Whitfield. I run Horizon Development." Rachel recognized the name immediately. Horizon had transformed skylines in Seattle, Austin, and Charlotte, always with attention to environmental impact and community integration. Their projects won awards not just for aesthetics, but for genuine innovation. They talked through dinner about green roofs and passive solar design, about the challenges of convincing clients to invest in long-term sustainability. Gregory asked questions that showed he understood the complexities, that he'd done his homework. When dessert arrived, Rachel realized she'd barely tasted her meal. She was genuinely enjoying herself in a way she hadn't in years. "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter?" Gregory asked as the dinner wound down. "The hotel bar is probably less chaotic than this ballroom." Rachel hesitated for only a heartbeat. "I'd like that." They found a corner table in the hotel lounge and kept talking. Gregory told her about his path from construction foreman to CEO, about the years he'd spent learning the business from the ground up. He'd been married once, divorced amicably after they'd grown in different directions. His 2 adult children worked outside the industry, one as a teacher, the other as a marine biologist. "What about you?" Gregory asked. "Tell me about Morrison Design's origin story." Rachel took a breath and told him the truth. About Sophie, about starting her firm as a single mother, about building something from scratch when everyone doubted her. When she mentioned her daughter, casually, testing his reaction, Gregory's face lit up with genuine warmth. "She sounds wonderful. How old is she?" 6, and obsessed with building things. Blocks, cardboard, whatever she can get her hands on. She wants to be an architect like her mom. "Smart kid." Gregory's interest felt authentic, not polite. Does she travel with you to conferences? This is actually my first trip without her. My parents are watching her in New York. They exchanged business cards before parting, and Gregory said he'd love to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Then he added, I mean that professionally, but I'd also enjoy getting to know you better personally, if you're open to it. Rachel felt something flutter in her chest, a feeling she thought Trevor had extinguished years ago. I'd be open to that. Their relationship developed gradually over the following months. Gregory lived in Seattle but traveled frequently for projects. He'd visit New York, take Rachel to dinner, and meet Sophie with an easy kindness that made the little girl light up. He never tried to replace her absent father or push for more than Rachel was ready to give. He simply showed up consistently and genuinely. Sophie started calling him Greg without prompting. She'd excitedly show him her latest school creation and drag him into conversations about her day. Gregory listened with full attention, asked thoughtful questions, and treated her like a person whose thoughts mattered. By spring 2022, they'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Gregory would fly in every couple of weeks, or Rachel would visit Seattle when Sophie stayed with her grandparents. They talked about design projects, books, travel, and the small frustrations of daily life. Gregory made Rachel laugh in ways she'd forgotten were possible. He supported her work, connected her with potential clients, and treated her as an equal partner. When Gregory proposed in October on a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands with Sophie along, it felt absolutely right. He got down on one knee on a rocky beach while Sophie cheered and danced around them. I love you, Gregory said simply. I love Sophie. I want us to be a family if you'll have me. The ring was elegant, a princess-cut diamond in a platinum setting. Rachel said yes through tears of joy. They married the following spring in a ceremony at Gregory's Seattle home, overlooking Puget Sound. Sophie served as the flower girl, taking her job with adorable seriousness. Rachel's parents beamed from the front row. Gregory's children welcomed Rachel and Sophie with open arms. It was small, intimate, and perfect. Everything her first engagement should have been. Rachel's life had settled into a beautiful rhythm by November 2023. Morrison Design thrived in Seattle with 15 employees and a steady stream of high-profile projects. Sophie, now 8 years old, loved her new school and called Gregory Dad more often than not. Their blended family felt natural, effortless. Then Trevor's email arrived. Rachel was reviewing blueprints at her home office when the notification popped up on her screen. The subject line read simply, "From Trevor." Her stomach lurched. 8 years of complete silence, and now this. She stared at the preview text for a long moment before opening it. Rachel, I know I don't deserve your time or attention, but I need to speak with you. It's urgent, please. Trevor Rachel showed the email to Gregory that evening. He read it, his jaw tightening slightly. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to delete it and pretend it never happened. That's absolutely your right. But another part wonders what could possibly be urgent after all this time. Gregory took her hand. If you want to find out, I support you. Just remember, you don't owe him anything. Rachel sent a brief reply. What is this about? Trevor's response came within minutes. Paragraphs of emotional appeals about needing to see her in person, about regretting his choices, about wanting to make things right. Between the desperate pleas, Rachel caught glimpses of something else. A man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. She did what she should have done first. She Googled him. The search results painted a grim picture. FlashPay had struggled significantly after its 2019 public offering. Larger payment platforms had eaten into their market share with aggressive pricing and better technology. The company had made a series of questionable decisions, including a disastrous expansion into cryptocurrency that had tanked when the crypto market crashed. FlashPay's stock price had collapsed. The company's valuation had plummeted from $300 million to barely $50 million. Trevor's personal wealth had evaporated along with it. Several articles mentioned ongoing lawsuits from investors claiming he'd misrepresented the company's financial health and growth projections. Then Rachel found the tabloid piece that explained everything. Trevor had gotten engaged 2 years earlier to a woman named Veronica Hammond, daughter of a prominent venture capitalist. They dated seriously, announced their engagement at a charity gala with all the fanfare Trevor loved. But Veronica had called off the wedding just months before the ceremony, citing irreconcilable differences. Anonymous sources told a different story. She'd discovered Trevor's mounting debts and his obsessive work habits that left no room for an actual relationship. The broken engagement had cost him more than a fiancée. It had severed his access to her family's investment network, connections he desperately needed to save his failing company. Rachel leaned back in her chair, processing what she'd learned. Trevor had thrown away their relationship and their child for money and status. Now both were slipping through his fingers, and suddenly fatherhood seemed appealing. She felt a grim satisfaction reading about his struggles. Not because she wished him harm, but because karma had finally caught up to someone who caused so much pain. So Trevor lost everything he abandoned Rachel for, and now he wants back in. But you won't believe what he said when they finally met. He actually thought he deserved a second chance after 8 years. His entitlement will make your blood boil. Hit that share button if you think some mistakes can't be undone, and keep watching, because Rachel's response is perfect. Rachel agreed to meet Trevor on one condition: a public place with Gregory present. She chose a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, neutral territory where he couldn't make a scene. Gregory sat at a nearby table, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Trevor arrived 15 minutes late, looking nothing like the confident entrepreneur she remembered. The expensive suit still bore a designer label, but it hung loose on his frame as if he'd lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hair, once meticulously styled, looked like he'd merely run his fingers through it. "Rachel." He reached for her hand across the table. She pulled back. "Thank you for seeing me. You have 20 minutes. What do you want?" The words tumbled out in a rush, clearly rehearsed. He'd made terrible mistakes. He'd been young and stupid and scared. Walking away from her, from their child, was the biggest regret of his life. Every success he'd achieved felt hollow without a family to share it with. Veronica's rejection had opened his eyes to what truly mattered. He'd been in therapy for 6 months, working through his issues, understanding why he'd run. He was terrified of failing as a father, so he'd failed by not trying. But he was ready now. He'd changed. He wanted another chance. He wanted to meet his daughter, to be part of their lives again. "I know you probably don't believe me, but I've done the work, Rachel. I understand what I did wrong. Please, let me prove it. Let me meet Sophie." Rachel let him finish. When she spoke, her voice was steady, almost calm. "You left when I was 2 months pregnant. You chose your company over your child before she was even born. You didn't send a birthday card. You didn't call to ask how she was doing. For 8 years, Sophie and I didn't exist to you. I know I was wrong, but I want to fix that now. Sophie is 8 years old. She has a father, Gregory, my husband. She has a life, friends, routines, happiness. You think you can just show up and disrupt all that because you've finally decided you're ready? She deserves to know her real father." The words hit like a slap. Rachel's careful composure cracked. Her real father is the man who's been there for her every single day, who reads to her at night and helps her with science projects and shows up to her soccer games. You're a stranger to her, Trevor. Nothing more. That's not fair. Fair? Rachel's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from other patrons. She lowered it with effort. You want to talk about fair? You left me $50,000 like I was a contractor you'd hired and dismissed. You got everything you wanted. Money, success, recognition. I got late nights feeding a colicky baby alone. I got judgmental looks from other parents who wondered where her father was. I got panic attacks about making rent and keeping food on the table. But I also got Sophie, and I built a life for us. We survived without you. We thrived without you. I made mistakes, but people can change. I'm asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand on your timeline. You don't get to waltz back in because your life fell apart and suddenly fatherhood seems appealing. Sophie is not a backup plan for when your first choices don't work out. Trevor's face reddened. His voice took on an edge. I have rights. She's my daughter biologically. I could get a lawyer. Try it. Rachel's eyes hardened. You abandoned her. You have zero legal standing. And if you attempt to disrupt her life, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. Every investor, every business contact, every journalist who's ever written about you. I'll tell them how you walked away from your pregnant fiancée because she might hurt your image. You wouldn't. Watch me. Gregory appeared at her elbow. Everything all right here? Trevor looked between them, something ugly flickering across his face. So you upgraded, is that it? Found someone richer than me? Gregory's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried quiet steel. I think it's time for you to leave. This isn't over. Trevor stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Sophie has a right to know me. Sophie has a right to stability and love, Rachel said, her voice firm and final. Things you couldn't provide then and can't provide now. Don't contact me again. She watched him storm out, shoulders tight with anger and desperation. Her hands trembled as she picked up her coffee cup. Gregory slid into the seat Trevor had vacated, covering her hand with his own. Are you okay? I will be. Rachel took a shaky breath. He actually thought I'd welcome him back. After everything. People reveal their character in crisis. He ran when things got hard. You stayed and built something beautiful. Rachel squeezed his hand. Thank you for being here. Always. Trevor didn't give up after the coffee shop confrontation. If anything, Rachel's rejection seemed to fuel his desperation. The emails started the next day, then the voicemails. His messages alternated between apologetic and accusatory, sometimes within the same paragraph. He'd beg for another chance, then criticize Rachel for being unforgiving. He'd claim Sophie deserved to know him, then question why Rachel was poisoning their daughter against him. Rachel deleted every message without responding. Then he showed up at Morrison Design's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Rachel's assistant buzzed her desk, voice uncertain. There's a man here who says he needs to speak with you urgently. He won't give his name, but he's being persistent. Rachel's stomach dropped. She walked to the reception area and found Trevor pacing near the entrance, looking agitated. We need to talk, he said when he saw her. We have nothing to discuss. You need to leave. Rachel, please. Security, could you escort this gentleman out? Rachel kept her voice calm and professional. 2 security guards appeared and guided Trevor toward the exit. He left, but not before shouting that she was making a mistake, that she couldn't keep him from his daughter forever. Her employees exchanged uncomfortable glances. Rachel returned to her office, closed the door, and took several deep breaths to steady herself. The harassment escalated online. Trevor created a fake social media profile using a stock photo and a generic name. He sent friend requests to Rachel's colleagues and clients, tried messaging her through the platform. Rachel blocked the account and reported it. Another one appeared days later. She blocked that one too. Then came the letter that crossed every line. Gregory found it first. He'd gone to collect the mail on a Saturday morning while Rachel was making breakfast and Sophie was watching cartoons. He saw the envelope addressed to Sophie Whitfield with unfamiliar handwriting and no return address. Something about it felt wrong. He opened it. Inside, Trevor had written a 3-page letter designed to convince an 8-year-old child. He included photos of himself, described himself as her real daddy who loves her very much, and painted Rachel as the villain keeping them apart. He asked Sophie to convince her mother to let them meet, told her that families belong together, and suggested that she was missing out on knowing him. Gregory's jaw clenched as he read. He walked into the kitchen and handed the letter to Rachel without a word. Her hands shook as she scanned the pages. He sent this to our home, to Sophie. She didn't see it. I caught it first. He's trying to convince a child. Rachel's voice was tight with fury. That's it. I'm calling a lawyer. By Monday afternoon, Rachel sat in an attorney's office. By Wednesday, they'd filed for a restraining order based on Trevor's pattern of harassment, the repeated unwanted contact, the workplace intrusion, the attempt to manipulate a minor child. The petition included printed emails, transcripts of voicemails, and the letter to Sophie. The hearing took place 2 weeks later. Trevor arrived with his own lawyer looking defensive. Rachel testified about his 8-year absence, his sudden reappearance after his financial collapse, and his escalating behavior. She presented the documentation methodically, letting the facts speak for themselves. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, read through the evidence with a deepening frown. When both sides had presented their cases, she delivered her verdict. "Mr. Ashford," she said, voice stern, "you relinquished any claim to fatherhood when you walked away 8 years ago. The time for second thoughts was then, not now when it's convenient for you." Trevor started to respond. The judge held up her hand. "Your attempt to contact a minor child directly, without parental consent, shows remarkably poor judgment. If you truly cared about your biological daughter's well-being, you'd respect the stable family she has, rather than trying to disrupt it for your own emotional needs." She signed the restraining order. Trevor was prohibited from contacting Rachel, Sophie, or anyone in their household. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Rachel left the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in months. The law had made it clear Trevor couldn't hurt them anymore. Sophie never saw the letter. She never knew about most of Trevor's attempts to contact them. Rachel and Gregory decided she'd learn the full story when she was older, when she could process it with maturity. For now, she only knew the age-appropriate truth. Her mom had once been engaged to someone who wasn't ready to be a father, so he left, and then her mom met Gregory, who loved them both completely. It was enough truth for an 8-year-old. The rest could wait. Life returned to its beautiful rhythm after the restraining order. Rachel could finally breathe without looking over her shoulder, could focus on what truly mattered, her family and her work. Morrison Design won a prestigious commission to design a mixed-use development in Portland. The project combined residential units, retail space, and community gardens, all built to LEED Platinum standards. Rachel threw herself into the design work, collaborating with her team to create something that would serve the community for decades. The client loved their proposal. Construction broke ground in spring 2024. Gregory's Horizon development landed an equally impressive project, a skyline-defining tower in Vancouver that would incorporate cutting-edge sustainability features. He and Rachel often worked late into the evening, sitting side by side at their home office, discussing green building materials and renewable energy systems. Their professional partnership enhanced their personal one, each understanding the demands and rewards of the work they loved. They bought a vacation home on Orcas Island that summer. The cabin sat nestled among Douglas firs, with a view of the water that turned gold at sunset. Weekends there became sacred. No emails, no conference calls, just family time. Gregory taught Sophie to sail. Rachel painted watercolors on the deck. They hiked forest trails and cooked meals together, building memories that mattered more than any business achievement. Sophie thrived in ways that made Rachel's heart swell. Piano lessons revealed a natural talent for music. Her teacher said she had an ear for melody and the discipline to practice without being asked. At school, she excelled across subjects, but her creative writing assignments stood out. She'd inherited her mother's eye for detail and her ability to tell stories that drew people in. September 2025 brought Rachel to a San Francisco conference. She'd been invited to present a case study on the Portland project, recognition that Morrison Design had become a leader in sustainable urban development. The presentation went exceptionally well. Architects and developers lined up afterward to exchange business cards and discuss potential collaborations. During the networking reception that evening, Rachel was deep in conversation with a potential client when movement across the crowded convention hall caught her eye. Trevor. He stood near the registration desk, older and visibly worn down. The years hadn't been kind. Whatever fights he'd been fighting had left their mark in the slump of his shoulders, the lines etched deeper around his eyes. Their eyes met for a brief moment, less than 2 seconds, long enough for Rachel to see recognition flicker across his face. She turned and walked away, not running, not panicking, simply choosing not to engage. She excused herself from the conversation, moved to a different section of the hall, and continued networking as if nothing had happened. Because to her, it hadn't. Trevor was a closed chapter, a lesson learned, a reminder of who she no longer was. When she glanced back minutes later, he was gone. He hadn't followed. He hadn't approached. Maybe the restraining order had finally sunk in. Maybe he'd realized she meant what she'd said, Or maybe he'd simply seen in her eyes that she'd moved on completely and there was nothing left for him to reclaim. Trevor was her past. This, Sophie's laughter, Gregory's steady presence, the work she loved. This was her present and her future. That evening, back in her hotel room, Rachel video called home. Sophie's face filled the screen, grinning wide and showing off the gap where her front tooth had been just days earlier. "Mom, guess what? I got an A on my science project." "That's amazing, sweetheart. Tell me all about it." Sophie launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her volcano model, complete with hand gestures and sound effects for the eruption. Gregory's voice chimed in from off-screen, adding proud details about how she'd researched different types of lava flow and created scale models. Rachel listened, smiling, her heart full. This is my family, she thought. This is what matters. Trevor had begged for a place in their lives, but he'd been asking for the wrong thing. He'd wanted access to Sophie to fill the emptiness in his own life, to assuage his guilt about being a failure. He'd never actually considered what Sophie needed, what Rachel needed, what would truly be best for the child he'd abandoned. Rachel had learned something crucial through those years of single motherhood and rebuilding with Gregory. Family wasn't about biology or obligation. It was about showing up every single day, through the mundane and the difficult moments. It was about choosing each other repeatedly and intentionally. Gregory had become Sophie's father not through DNA, but through bedtime stories and scraped knee comfort and patient explanations of math homework. Trevor would probably never understand that. He'd spend the rest of his life believing he'd been wronged, that Rachel had been vindictive in keeping him away, that circumstances had conspired against him. He'd crafted a narrative where he was the victim, where his mistakes deserved infinite forgiveness simply because he'd finally decided to ask for it. Rachel felt pity for him, but nothing more. His regret, however genuine it might be, didn't create an obligation on her part. His loneliness, however painful for him, wasn't her responsibility to fix. She'd moved forward. She'd built something real and lasting, and she'd done it without him. "Mom, you okay? You got quiet." Sophie's voice pulled her back to the present. "I'm perfect, baby. Just thinking about how lucky I am to have you." "And Greg?" "And Greg." The screen went dark after their goodbyes. Rachel sat in the quiet hotel room, savoring the moment. Tomorrow she'd fly home to Seattle, to the life she'd created through determination and grace. Trevor would return to whatever existence he'd built from his broken dreams. Their paths had diverged permanently, and Rachel had chosen the better road. If Rachel's journey moved you, drop a comment telling me about a time you chose yourself over someone who didn't deserve your energy. This story proves that sometimes the best revenge is building an amazing life. Make sure you're subscribed to the Penthouse Diaries for more stories about resilience, love, and second chances that actually matter. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Rachel's victory wasn't measured by the fact that she'd married someone wealthier than Trevor. Though that was true, it wasn't about achieving greater professional success, though Morrison Design had surpassed anything FlashPay ever accomplished. The real triumph was learning that happiness isn't about revenge or proving anything to someone who wronged you. Her true win came from building something good despite devastating setbacks. From opening her heart to love after betrayal had nearly destroyed her capacity to trust. From creating a family defined not by shared DNA, but by unbreakable bonds forged through daily commitment and unconditional support. Trevor's begging accomplished exactly one thing. It confirmed Rachel had made the right choice in letting him go. Some people earn second chances through genuine change and humble dedication to becoming better. They do the work quietly without demands or timelines, accepting that forgiveness is a gift rather than an entitlement. Trevor had only earned the natural consequences of his own actions: loneliness, regret, and the permanent loss of people who would have loved him if he'd been brave enough to stay. And that was exactly as it should be. The journey had come full circle, from that April evening when Rachel collapsed on her kitchen floor, sobbing over an abandonment note, to this September night when she smiled in a hotel room while talking to her daughter. From abandoned and broken to married and thriving, From questioning her worth to knowing her value with absolute certainty. Trevor thought he was begging for a second chance, but Rachel had already moved on to a first-class life, one he'd never be part of and one he'd never deserve. She'd discovered that the best response to someone who walked away wasn't anger or bitterness. It was simply building something so beautiful, so fulfilling, so complete that their absence became irrelevant. That was the lesson Sophie would learn someday. That was the truth Rachel lived every day. And that was the ending this story deserved.